My name is Anita Hill, and I am a professor of law at the University of Oklahoma. It would have been more comfortable to remain silent. It took no initiative to inform anyone. I took no initiative to inform anyone. But when I was asked by a representative of this committee to report my experience, I felt that I had to tell the truth. I could not keep silent.
27 years after Anita Hill came forward to testify that then Supreme Court Justice nominee Clarence Thomas had sexually harassed her, and we know how that turned out. He was confirmed anyway. Another Supreme Court nominee is facing allegations of sexual misconduct, this time made anonymously. In a letter that landed on the desk of United States Senator Dianne Feinstein, a woman alleged Judge Brett Kavanaugh tried to force himself on her while they were in high school in the 1980s. According to the New York Times, citing 3 sources familiar with the letter, and the New Yorker, both of whom published reports on the allegations on Friday. Kavanaugh is denying the allegation, saying in a statement, "I categorically and unequivocally deny this allegation. I did not do this back in high school or at any time." Elie and Nayyera back with me, and joining me now is Karine Jean-Pierre of MoveOn.org. And Karine, there's a lot that's strange here. I want to get into the delay in getting this information Senator Feinstein had since July, according to both the Ronan Farrow-Jane Mayer story as well as the New York Times story. She had this information. She held this information. She said it was because she wanted to protect the identity of this accuser and protect her privacy. But is it strange to you that she did not disclose, even to the other Democratic members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, anything about this or question him about it even in closed session?
Yes, and that's exactly what I was going to say. I can understand protecting women who come forward and their identity and making sure that, you know, like I said, they're protected. But she sat on this for 2 months, as you stated, Joy, and she didn't even bring it up behind closed doors of the sessions that they had with Brett Kavanaugh. She could have brought it up there. She didn't give it to the FBI when she first heard it. And so it is troubling in that way. I think there's things that she could have done a lot sooner before today. But at the end of the day, it should be about these allegations. They're incredibly troubling. This process has been going way too fast. It was, less than 60 days after his nomination, he was already starting a hearing. And we should slow this process down. There should not be, violence should not be allowed in society at all, and certainly not at the highest court of our nation. And we need to slow this down. And it should not be about Democrats. It should not be about when it came out. It should be about Brett Kavanaugh, because this is a lifetime appointment.
Absolutely. We started off playing Anita Hill, who was so brave to come forward. Yeah. There were 3 other women who were willing to stand by her, but memorably, Democratic senators, including former Vice President Joe Biden, did not call those other 3 women who would have backed her up and didn't allow them to be heard. But in this case, Anita Hill, who had to do it all alone back then, she released a statement saying the reluctance of someone to come forward demonstrates that even in the Me Too era, it remains incredibly difficult to report harassment, abuse, or assault by people in power. Given the seriousness of these allegations, the government needs to find a fair and neutral way for complaints to be investigated. The Senate Judiciary Committee should put in place a process that enables anyone with a complaint of this nature to be heard. I have seen firsthand what happens when such a process is weaponized against an accuser, and no one should have to endure that again. And just to make it clear that what this accuser is alleging is serious. It was a long time ago, but this is the Ronan Farrow-Jane Mayer version of the story from the New Yorker. And this is the description. It is disturbing. It says the allegation dates back to the early 1980s when Kavanaugh was a high school student and the woman attended a nearby high school. In the letter, the woman alleged that during an encounter at a party, Kavanaugh held her down and that he attempted to force himself on her. She claimed in the letter that Kavanaugh and a classmate of his, both of whom had been drinking, turned up music that was then playing in the room to conceal the sound of her protest, and that Kavanaugh covered her mouth with his hand, but that she was able to free herself. And I should note that, you know, the NBC hasn't confirmed any of this reporting or seen the letter, but, you know, they date back to when he was in high school. I'll turn it over to you, Nayyera. I mean, it's not surprising that this woman would not want to subject herself to what Anita Hill had to go through. But is it surprising to you that we're only getting this allegation now after the hearings are over?
Oh, I think that Karine mentions a great point. There's so much information about Kavanaugh that's coming out well after the hearings because the process has been so rushed. He's doing a job interview for a lifetime appointment. When people take jobs for 2 years and it takes them longer to interview in a process with any of the big companies in the United States. So it should be slowed down, not least because we are in a very interesting political and moral moment. I mean, the only reason we know about the term sexual harassment is because Anita Hill spoke up about it nearly 20 years ago. The only reason that we are hearing about these allegations in a way that is meaningful is because of that moment that's been created by Me Too. But we need to have the opportunity to understand and figure out what kind of moral character and moral implication this has. Meaning, we all want to have people on the Supreme Court who are of high moral character, but we also want to make sure that women have the opportunity to be heard, and we also want to make sure that nobody's being held accountable for something that was never a conviction. That's going to take more than a minute, and it should not be rushed in a process where next week we suddenly have to make a final judgment on giving this guy a lifetime appointment.
Yeah, and Elie, I mean, your views on Kavanaugh are very well known, but I want to go back and unpack, because this is a guy who's faced a lot of other allegations, including there are senators who are saying they can't vote for him because they believe he lied to Congress before. There's all sorts of issues. It's still being jammed through. Dianne Feinstein, to stay on this for a moment, she said on Thursday that the individual who came forward strongly requested confidentiality, declined to come forward and press the matter further. She's honored that decision. She says, I have, however, referred the matter to federal investigative authorities. So if she's referred it to investigation. She's had it since July. What do you make of this?
She also said later in that statement, oh, I also thought that it was better to focus on the law and not this personal stuff. And that is where she is wrong. Kavanaugh on the law is Republican, just like Neil Gorsuch or Ray Kethledge or whoever else they want to drag up. But it's this character stuff. Kavanaugh is the most ethically challenged Supreme Court nominee we've had since Clarence Thomas. You don't have to believe these allegations necessarily. I don't know the truthfulness of these allegations, but I know Brett Kavanaugh isn't telling the truth. Oh, how can he defend himself? He doesn't know who she is even. He knows who she is. Yeah. He remembers the party. I remember every single girl I passed a note to in chemistry class.
Right.
All right? He knows who she is.
Yeah.
And he's not telling the truth about that. He's not telling the truth about his debts. Baseball tickets. Who believes that? Yeah. He's not telling the truth about his gambling. He says he played a dice game for no money. Who believes that? If I roll with my children, we're playing for Skittles. All right? That's completely untrue that he played a dice game for no money. It's completely untrue that he lied to Congress. That's the last thing I just got to on my list. He lied to Congress. This process needs to be stopped. And any Republican who cannot see their moral way clear to say, let's just get another conservative. Yeah. They can pass him in the lame duck.
Yeah.
If Kavanaugh succeeds, it is a moral failing of the process.
And the process has included, Karine, Republicans who, again, only Dianne Feinstein knew about this letter apparently since July. She didn't even tell other Democrats. However, quick, fast, in a hurry, to the point of whether or not Mr. Kavanaugh does know who this woman is and is familiar with this allegation. Very quickly, a letter was produced, signed by 65 women.
Yep.
This guy knew 65 women. He went to an all-boys high school, but he knew 65 girls in high school who all produced a letter saying, for the entire time we've known Brett Kavanaugh, his behavior honorably, treated women with respect. We strongly believe it's important to convey the information to the committee at this time. How did they come up with 65 women that went to high school with him when he went to an all-boy high school?
They were ready.
Quick?
They were ready, Joy. They were ready. They knew about this. And so they had it at the ready. And like you said, they dropped it just like that. So they knew about this accusation, the accusation of sexual assault before the New Yorker article, clearly. And so they were ready for it, and they released that letter. But here's the thing, Joy. So we know that Brett Kavanaugh lied, right? We know he lied under oath. We know his extreme views on Roe v. Wade, on affirmative action, and now he's being accused of sexual assault. What else do senators need to stop this process? What else do they need? He couldn't be more flawed and more just ethically challenged, and they just refuse to stop this. And why do they? Well, let's think about it. The midterms are coming up. They have nothing else to sell, right? They have Gorsuch, and that's pretty much about it. They can't run on their awful tax cuts. They're trying to take health care away from everybody, and SCOTUS picks actually move their base. Yeah. So that's one one reason there. And who knows what the outcome of the midterms might be for them.
Yep.
So this is completely politics. It's not about the country. It's about their party. It's about giving Donald Trump a win.
Yeah, Elie.
There's one more thing that Kavanaugh has that the replacement level arch conservative doesn't, right? And that is Kavanaugh's ridiculous theory that everybody in the executive branch works for the president and not the American people. Right. That's the one thing that Gorsuch doesn't have, or Kethledge doesn't have. This belief that Trump cannot be charged or subpoenaed or looked at askance.
One might think it's why he was nominated.
And that's the thing. That's why he's still here.
And that's why he's still. And the thing that Nayyera that's so incredible is the lengths to which Republicans are willing to go to give that to Donald Trump, to immunize him through the Supreme Court, essentially, to put someone on the court that is essentially, you know, it's sort of, you know, seating the jury in a way. And they're not. None of this is moving Republicans at all. This is going forward no matter what is said. Republicans have been coming out giving statements saying, nope, Thursday, we're going to have the hearing. We're voting on it. It doesn't matter what comes out. And they're also using this to turn it around on Dianne Feinstein and make a claim, much like what happened in the Roy Moore case, very different, obviously, allegations in Alabama. The Senate case, after Feinstein's announcement, a White House spokesman named Carrie Kupek came out to say about Kavanaugh, not until the eve of the confirmation has Senator Feinstein or anyone raised the specter of new information about it, calling it an 11th hour attempt to delay its confirmation. No, Dianne Feinstein didn't drop this at the 11th hour. The New York Times and the New Yorker, intrepid reporters did, because it had become an open secret in Washington.
And that's the unfortunate part of all of this, is that I hope this prompts women to come forward at the time something happens and to be reporting instances of sexual assault and abuse, because if we had a police record here, I think that would make this an even stronger case, open and shut. But the challenge with the people who are actually doing the confirming right now is that they are more interested in executing their agenda, extreme conservative agenda of stacking the judiciary, of passing through eliminating health care and passing through tax cuts that help corporates. They are willing to accept morally flawed candidates, a morally flawed president, and now a morally flawed Supreme Court nominee just to execute their agenda.
Yeah, and you know, we're running out of time, but Karine, you know, what would it mean, you know, to have both Kavanaugh and Clarence Thomas, you know, on the court? I mean, just what does that symbolize for the country, given the allegations against them both?
It sends a horrible message to women when you have two people who have been accused of sexual assault, you know, on the highest courts of the land. And it's just really unfortunate, and it should be allowed. It could be stopped. The senators have the power to stop this, and they can. There's no reason to move this as fast as they are. They need to stop this process.
And we should clarify, with Clarence Thomas, it was sexual harassment, and with this case, it is an allegation of assault. It's pretty serious, and there'll be two of them on the court. Thank you, Elie Mystal. Thank you, Nayyera Haq. Karine will be back in our next hour. The walls are closing in on Donald Trump. We will also talk hurricane politics. That's next.